Well, last season, the Chicago White Sox did not have a season that they were hoping for. 81 and 81, 500, but over 10 games behind the Cleveland Guardians in the AL Central. What does this year come for the Chicago White Sox? A new coaching staff, but they lose a leader in the clubhouse. Let's talk about it here on a Route Report episode of the OK Baseball Podcast. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the show, the Route Report here at the OK Baseball Podcast, presented by Slasher Sports. I'm your host, Christian Rao. Welcome into another team preview as we continue on as opening day is just a few weeks away. We're talking the Chicago White Sox in this episode today, and joining me back for another year, Sleepy Harold, Steve Hasman from Future Sox. What's going on, my friend? Welcome back to the show. I'm excited to talk White Sox with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christian. I don't know that I share the exact same enthusiasm talking about the 2022 White Sox, but I'm happy to be back and happy to talk baseball. Always love this time of year.
Absolutely. Well, let's get the bad stuff out of the way first, and hopefully we end with some optimism in this episode. 2022, as you mentioned, probably not that excited to talk about because it wasn't a year that it just didn't turn out the way that many expected it to do so. I will go out on a tangent and say I have not been able to predict and figure out the AL Central for many years now. I thought the Twins were going to be good one year. They're awful. I thought the White Sox were going to be good. Then they fall off the season. I can't figure out the AL Central, so I'm not going to go out and predict this one this year. I'm going to make you do it at the end of this episode. However, last season, 81, 500, 11 games behind the Cleveland Guardians. They had issues with their management. They had issues with pitching staff, offensive production, injuries. I mean, you name it. They had a lot of issues. Take me back in your perspective, someone who covers the White Sox, their prospects, all that stuff like that. How did you think about 2022?
Yeah, so I remember like early on, I went to maybe it was the ninth game of the season. It was like their first homestand, and the White Sox were like 6-3. You know, I always tend to be reserved in my judgment or expectations on the team, just given the track record of them being pretty much just mediocre. Like their entire existence is just mediocre. So like I tend to just, approach every season with some pause. After that game, they're like 6-3. They played the Rays, so they won. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is legit. And then they proceeded to lose. I want to say it was the next 7 straight games to fall under 500, and things just kept escalating, and it just kept snowballing. I mean, it was really everything that could have went wrong did. Whether it was, just players, notable, important players being injured, underperformance of the players that were healthy or at least playing, very questionable and puzzling managerial decisions, whether that goes to the twice notable intentional walks with 2 strikes. I mean, the picture or the video of Tony falling asleep in the dugout. I mean, the team being told not to run or try hard, essentially because they're playing hurt. Playing players that were actually hurt, like Luis Robert at the end of the season is literally swinging a bat with one hand because he couldn't hold it. I mean, it was like Murphy's Law was what happened last year with the 2022 White Sox, just because they had some success and the universe needed to rectify, get back on track, and anything, it just had to be reset. And, the Whites, it was a lifeless effort, essentially, the entire season. And, even dating back a little bit into 2021, where the White Sox started off hot before the All-Star break. They were well above 500. And then pretty much from the All-Star break 2021 through last year, they've been mediocre right around your 500 mark. Like, it's just who this team has been. So they stayed true to that, and it was pretty awful to watch mostly.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of that, and I'm not sure if that's the case. Maybe you can fill me in, but a lot of that did seem to be off the field issues. And you mentioned injuries, things like that. But it seemed like there was a really interesting and probably this gross, unfortunate relationship reunion with Tony La Russa as he comes back for those 2 years. It really didn't work out. I mean, from the beginning, it seemed like it was just set for failure with his DUI and all that stuff, and then the sleeping in the dog. It just never seemed like it ended. There's never a good story coming out from La Russa. But regardless, he is no longer there. A new manager comes in. Before we get away from the departures of some of the certain players, and I know that's something that we should discuss, what do you think about this new manager, the transition, a new coaching staff as well for your White Sox?
Yeah, so Pedro Grifol is the new manager. Not going to lie, didn't know anything about him. He was rumored like early on is like, this is a guy they kind of like and were interested in, and apparently he interviewed very well, kind of knocked it out of the park, I guess set the standard for them. And again, this is, judging the White Sox front office and their decision making, setting standards and what they like is, again, it's something you approach with some caution. But like through his press conference and what Pedro has done in the early portion of spring training, what they've been emphasizing, he seems more analytically based, so which is something we didn't get under Tony La Russa. They seem to be holding players accountable, like they're working on the fundamental parts of the game, which I mean, again, probably to most people seems ridiculous, but the Sox were very poor in all of those regards. Like they're been a bad defensive team, bad base running team. So like focusing on they've been doing more like short burst, intense practice like reps compared to what they've done in the past. I mean, I can't speak to really what they did previously, but all of the work that they're doing, it's like short burst intensity. That's what Pedro's been preaching. And it's like winning the day, not looking too far ahead, which is better. I think they, compared to last year, like they got a bit, over their skis on like, oh, we're going to run away with this. Like, we're cool. We can kind of coast. But even like with the rest of the coaching staff, like there's a lot of new blood in here with Charlie Montoyo, Castro, Eddie Rodriguez, like even Mike Tosar. He came over as well from Kansas City. They promoted Chris Johnson is like assistant hitting coach from Charlotte. So there's a lot of the holdovers that have been like mainstays with the organization. The White Sox are a big like we promote from within family tie kind of deal. They kind of gutted that. I mean, they kept Ethan Katz, who has had success with Carlos Rodon, Dylan Cease last year. He fixed Lucas Giolito before he kind of fell apart last season. The other coach, Daryl Boston, does first base. I don't know why they kept him, but whatever. He's doing outfield, so it is what it is. But the overarching theme is like they're working on the fundamental. They're trying hard. They're holding players accountable, which is something that was clearly lacking last year. So the messaging is great. Everything with that, like I know the collective from what I've seen on White Sox Twitter, and you don't want to gauge too much into Twitter, but they're positive reactions. So obviously we'll have to see what happens come March, April, May when the regular season gets here. But the early impressions that I get are positive from what Pedro and his staff are preaching and trying to get out of the players.
That's good. Well, that's good to hear because there was a report that came out earlier this week mentioning about there was some issues in the clubhouse last season, and it was pointed to what we thought, at least what I thought, as a clubhouse leader in Jose Abreu, who is now on the Houston Astros. I'm sure you saw this article. Jose Abreu, no longer a Chicago White Sox. It's going to look really weird seeing him in an Astros jersey next year. I'm sure that's going to be the case. But what do you take away from that report of possibly having some fractured relationships with Abreu and maybe other people in the clubhouse?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, so I get it from both sides. Like, I get, Jose had been here his entire career. They paid him, they kept him. I'm going to sign myself, like back in 2019, 2020. So like Jose had kind of been like the quiet leader of the team, more of the lead by example type. And given what had happened last year, it kind of seemed. I mean, again, just to me, looking at it, like, yeah, man, you're frustrated. Like, you want to win, and you've been kind of up until recently, like the team had been pretty non-competitive. I think the other downside, like to where I get in a sense, like I think he kind of felt slighted. Um, you know, the way that the White Sox are constructed, the best way like I put it to some other people, to people that maybe not aren't as familiar is like they'd be like a great 16-inch softball team because they have a lot of like slugging types that don't necessarily care. They hadn't cared about defense. And like going back to last year, like the Sox were playing two first basemen in the corner outfield positions. Like that's not good. They had another, DH, like in addition to Yasmani Grandal, who's like a catcher DH and was injured, and then like Jose Abreu, who's a first baseman DH, and then it's just like they had too many. It's just like a glut in a position to where all right, something has to give, and Jose's contract expiring with him, Jose Abreu is still a great hitter, quiet leader. Now, with him going to Houston, he doesn't have to be the guy like that he was here, but it's, he is, he's good. But he is an aging player. So for the White Sox, where they're at and what they needed, like roster wise to fill, spending your limited resources on a position that you already had multiple like internal candidates that could fill it, like didn't really make sense unless you're trading out of that glut of positions. And it's tough to see him leave, but like in the greater sense of like roster construction and like the team management, like it does make some sense why they let him go or didn't necessarily want to give him the 2 or the 3 and 58.5, or the 360, we'll call it for the sake of math. Like it just like the team needed to shore up these positions and get guys playing in the right spot, and the timing just happened to be with Jose that his contract was up and they have 4 other people that can play first base or DH. So
that's good to hear. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and that is true, especially with guys like Andrew Vaughn. We're going to see a lot of big things, I hope, from him. Other key departures, Johnny Cueto moving to Miami, A.J. Pollock taking a deal to Seattle, Vincent Vasquez heading over to Pittsburgh, and Josh Harrison to Philadelphia, Danny Mendick to the Mets. That's basically most of the departures. But the biggest thing I would say this offseason was the addition of Andrew Benintendi. I think we all kind of knew that the White Sox were going to be going after some sort of outfielder. I didn't know they were going to go chase Andrew Benintendi, and I'm actually quite surprised that they went for a deal like they did, 5 years, $75 million for Benintendi. I don't know, at least from an outside perspective looking in, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Benintendi being really your new guy in the outfield for the White Sox?
Yeah, I think like it was kind of surprising because I mean this is and also kind of surprising aspect, but that contract is the largest guaranteed contract that the White Sox have ever given out, the 575, which is again more ridiculous things from the White Sox, but it is what it is. Like in like on the whole, like Andrew Benintendi, the signing is good. He provides some of what the team needed. They needed lineup balance. He's a left-handed hitter. He's an actual outfielder. You know, they needed an actual outfielder, at least one, if not more than one. He is a guy that doesn't strike out a whole lot. Grinds out some at bats, can draw some walks. So he's kind of what the team needed after not quite being able to get on base or work a lot of at bats. I mean, there was too many times last year where they were just like seven, less than 10 pitch innings because it's just guys up there hacking, which is great when it works. Like Tim Anderson is known for that, where he's going up swinging, and hey, when you're batting 320 or whatever, and like that's what you do, that's fine. But when you're not hitting the ball with authority and just tapping out like on the infield and not running hard, like yeah, man, those you're not getting to the bullpen, you're not making the starting pitchers work. So they needed to do something to kind of grind out at bats, work these pitchers, work the lineups, work bullpens. So in that regard, yeah, the Benintendi signing makes sense, and the connection with Pedro Grifol from Kansas City, like that also makes sense. So it all added up. Like when the rumors started coming out, and the Sox have had a connection to where they did like him coming out of the draft back in
2015. Yeah.
2015. Okay, yeah, because they were hoping that he would have slipped to them at pick. What was it? 8, 9? It was right there. The Red Sox picked him right before. I know that.
Right.
So they'd have interest in him since then. So it makes sense. It filled a need, and can't really be mad at it. Like, I mean, it's just like the part that gets thrown in the Sox face a lot is that it's the largest contract ever for a guy who hit 5 home runs last year. And like, yeah, power is not a big part of his game. Some of it we think it should uptick, playing now 81 home games at Guaranteed Rate Field rather than Kauffman Stadium. So should see some increase there. But it was just kind of funny that like they needed some pop and whatever, and then they went and kind of get like if based on only last year number, like a slap hitting, outfielder. So.
Right. Yeah. Only seeing 81 games at Guaranteed Rate Stadium and seeing not 81 at Kauffman, maybe 6, maybe 7 games at Kauffman Stadium. If you're lucky. Yeah, it's going to be a big difference in play. Before I get to the rotation, because I got to talk about the arms. The arms are definitely a big, interesting piece this year, especially the bullpen for unfortunate reasons. But spring training obviously in full swing right now. What's the biggest position battle that you're paying attention to this spring that really could be a game changer for the White Sox in the first half of the season?
So the biggest position battle really would be the right field spot. Now, initially it was second base and right field until they Sox signed Elvis Andrus late to kind of keep the seat warm or hold it steady for a year. They signed him late last season after he was let go by Oakland, and he came in. He actually, surprisingly, he did really well with the White Sox. He was hitting for power. I think he was like 11 for 11 in stolen bases. I don't know that I quite expect that Elvis Andrus to come back. Based on like what he had done the previous 4 or 5 years. Like it's just kind of hold the fort, and solid defense is the position, and we're cool. Like I think that's a fair amount with a fair expectation. Right field, Oscar Colas, they've been hyping up. That's the international signee from last year. He started the season in Winston-Salem at High A and made it all the way up to AAA Charlotte. He's looked really good thus far. Through spring training, he slimmed down. He was a little thicker coming over from Japan, I should say. Got into better shape. Really torched the ball once he got to Double A last season, and then I mean, he only had a handful. I think it was like 7 or 9 games in AAA to end the year, but he's looked good. Like he's again another outfielder, an actual outfielder, with a good arm for right field, left-handed bat. So that's another thing that helps balance the lineup for the White Sox because they were pretty right-handed heavy. So the main competition there was really, are they going to try to shift Eloy Jimenez over there? He's not good in the outfield, but he is he's better than when they put Gavin Sheets out there, or miles better than Andrew Vaughn. So it's kind of like pick your poison on, if you have to put a bad outfielder out there, you probably put the bad outfielder who's actually an outfielder. So it's kind of, but Eloy seems to be more slotted to be like the primary DH while still getting reps in the outfield, just to kind of keep him fresh, keep him happy, keep him motivated, because he did come in, he lost a bunch of weight. That's a common theme with the White Sox, is the guys like got into shape and try to be more agile and get their bodies prepped for the season, because their big guys have been, their key cogs have just been getting hurt all the time. So to me, Oscar Colas will be the guy that will break camp with the club and hold down right field to start, just because I think he's the best fit. He's an actual outfielder. He provides left-handed pop, again, some of what the Sox need. So that would be the thing to keep the eye on position battle-wise. That's the main one. There also is, I guess now, the closer spot is up in the air with Liam Hendriks being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So they don't have technically like an assigned closer at this point. It seems to be, they have like Kendall Graveman, who's closed before. Ronaldo Lopez has been given some praise, I want to say, from Ethan Katz, the pitching coach, about his stuff, and like it could translate into the closing spot. And Ronaldo did very well last year, like once he got into his role as like a late inning, shutdown reliever. Joe Kelly could probably close, I guess, if you want him to. Aaron Bummer, if he's healthy, which that's always kind of the thing. He's generally not healthy all the time. So that's really the other position, is to kind of see who shakes out for like the early favorite to grab saves, unless they just go by committee matchup based. We're kind of keeping an eye on how that plays out, because we don't, you don't know with cancer, like when Liam will be ready, if he's even ready to come back at all this year. Like he's been at the spring training facility training and throwing, but it's that's really, they don't really provide any further update than that. So you don't want to rush a guy back too early from something as serious as that. So
right, yeah, that's bigger than baseball. Yeah, that's
exactly. Yeah.
Looking at this closer, I think the closer situation is interesting. When you look at a lot of the names that are on there, and you mentioned them, there's a lot of them that you could do a closer by committee. It looks like teams are going to start going that direction if you don't have a guy like Liam Hendriks to really anchor your bullpen. So maybe this might be a futuristic look for the White Sox, maybe moving forward. Who knows? But that's not a good problem to have. Obviously, we both, I'm sure I speak on your behalf as well. We wish everything but the best from Liam and hope everything turns out great.
Absolutely.
On this rotation, though, we talked about, obviously, Lucas Giolito, how he had an off year last year. You add Mike Clevenger. It looks like he's going to actually play this year after all the stuff that went on this offseason. We don't have to get into that. Lance Lynn, he's had some really good seasons, but he's getting a little older now, 36 years old. And then Dylan Cease. I am a huge fan of Dylan Cease. I think he is just I think he doesn't get enough credit. A lot of people, MLB put off the top 10 pitchers, and he was off the list. I thought that was just an absolute disgrace. I think he belongs in the top 10 pitchers. That's just my thought. But what's your thoughts on this rotation? Do you think Dylan Cease can keep it going? Do you think Giolito can get it back? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean that's the other part is like the rotation, has it's a lot of questions because like coming into last year, like okay, like Giolito's gonna kind of hold it down with Lance Lynn, and then hopefully Cease takes a step forward, hopefully Kopech takes a step forward, and then kind of Giolito, he was injured and then he got COVID and then he was just ineffective, and then Kopech got hurt. Lance Lynn got hurt in spring training, but Cease took off. Like Cease was phenomenal. I mean,
Right.
he was just. It's the only downside, not even downside. The only negative with Cease is it's like sometimes the command will escape him, and he'll just the walks will pile up. Like even, I mean, it's the spring training start, so it's grain of salt. But like he had a rough one yesterday. That's him still building up to whatever. So his building up his arm, his strength, and all that. So it's a spring training start, so don't pay too much into that. But
Right.
for this year, I mean, it's kind of like the same. It's the same thing. Kopech's recovering from off-season surgery. Lance Lynn, like you said, he was once he righted himself last year, like coming back, he started rough, but the end of the season, he really turned it on and was like that Lance Lynn we've seen of late. So, I mean, you hope Cease can anchor the rotation. You hope Giolito can get back to that, 2020, 2021 version of very good, top of ish rotation, like mid rotation starter type. I mean, if he wants to turn into like Lucas the ace again, that's great. Nobody here will mind. It's just I know he was adjusting. He packed on because with the lockout, he packed on some weight to think that would help him hold up better, but it just didn't work. So he cut that weight and now like changed up a bit with his throwing motion. Um, the Clevenger thing, I mean, like that whole situation, like he was cleared, so he's here.
Yep.
They've liked him, I guess. Like going back a couple of years, Ethan Katz is another guy who I want to say when he was with the Angel system, Clevenger was there as well. So he's kind of had an eye, thinks for something he spotted he can fix. I mean, it's just like that whole thing, only looking at it in like a baseball perspective is like,
Right.
okay, they're depending on him to be like a fourth, fifth starter. So hopefully he gives you a good amount of innings and, keeps you in ball games. The personal stuff kind of, you know, rubs you the wrong way. So, I mean, he was cleared by MLB,
Right.
that's whatever. I'm not here to make any judgment about whatever. Like it just doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just it's a very sticky situation. No matter which way, it just kind of feels weird. Like
I agree. Yep,
so.
I agree. I think this rotation will be fun though, and I think Dylan Cease is going to make another great year. I do. I'm excited to watch him pitch out of all this, and I always have really enjoyed watching Lance Lynn pitch. I think he resurrected himself in Texas, and he did some really good
Mhm.
things for you guys. It just like as you mentioned, needs to stay healthy. All right, well. You work for Future Sox, right? You contribute for Future Sox. So what that means, we need to talk about some of these Future Sox, whether there are some players at spring training or they're just some players that you're super excited about. I know we always talk about how we got to meet up in Charlotte for one of these games. You finally got down there and got a game in Charlotte, which is awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to see that you did that. But take me through it. MLB TV is giving away the minor league package for free this year. So I'm encouraging everyone to watch more minor league baseball because it's just absolutely amazing. So what are some prospects in the White Sox system that you recommend people pay attention to? Maybe they make an MLB debut this year, or just someone that you just say they got to pay attention because it's worth watching.
Sure. And I will say too, I mean, now that the pitch clock has been introduced for MLB, the pitch
Yeah,
clock in minor league baseball made the games like infinitely more enjoyable because like the
100%.
pacing had been an issue sometimes with minor league games that were just like slogs of like just pickoffs or bad defense and whatnot. The pitch clock was great. Like, I mean, when I was there, it was just games were boom, 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 quick. Like you don't even notice. It was phenomenal. So I'm a
Agreed.
big pitch clock fan here. Um,
Yep.
Back to the system though. So the note I got a couple from offensive and then a couple
Mhm.
pitchers.
All right,
So
great.
the offensive ones, I mean, it's probably too on brand or too simple, but Colson Montgomery, that is the White Sox top prospect. He came out of, it was a high school draft pick, um, first full season last year, and just pretty much blew everybody's expectations away. I mean, he's, depending on which site you may look at, I mean, he's for sure top 100 prospect, top 50 on most, top 30 in some, higher than that. So like he's just been, he's a six, I want to say 6'4", like 200. He gets a lot of Corey Seager comps just based on the height, but he's a guy that he's been getting positive reviews like defensively at the position. So there's thoughts that he can stick there for, you know, moving forward until he fills out or gets too big, whatever. But there's remarks that like, yeah, he might be able to stick as shortstop, and patient approach at the plate, doesn't, strike out a lot, takes his
Mhm.
walks. The power is developing. Not, I think the projections are around like maybe like 20-ish home run power. But I mean, for a guy that, was in his first taste of uh, minor league full season baseball last year, and he was one of the main guys to get promoted to Birmingham as a part of the Project Birmingham experiment. It was very encouraging to see that, like, oh, this high school prospect that the Sox chose, like, oh, he's immediately paying dividends. So he should probably start again this year in Birmingham. And given how we expect him to progress, I mean, he could be theoretically knocking on the door, at some point next year. Is probably being very optimistic. The other offensive prospect that I know we're excited about, at least I'm very excited to see, would be Brian Ramos. He's another guy who is always young for the level. Another guy who made it to Birmingham as part of Project Birmingham. He's a third base, can play second base as well. He's gotten pretty positive remarks at both positions now defensively, because that used to be kind of the the question mark with him was like, could he play? Where would he play on the field? But he seems to shore up his defensive ability to where he could stick at third or be a viable candidate for the Keystone at second. He's got a good arm, good defensive ability, very, very fast bat speed, some good pull power, gets a little pull happy at times, but he's always been aggressively assigned and young for the level. I want to say this is his age, or will be his age 21 season. Um, so making it to double A, or making it to at least high A as a 20-year-old, um, it's impressive. And what he's been able to do, he's been keeping up with older competition, and he's been better than average. So those are the very encouraging guys that I have my eyes on the offensive side of the system. And then for pitching, it would be the first round pick. Actually, well, it's the first and second round pick from last year. Noah
Okay.
Schultz was first round. He's a 6'9" lefty at I guess here, a local Illinois high school. He gets the Randy Johnson comps because he's tall and
Gotta
lefty,
love
which
that.
is, I
Gotta
mean,
love that.
they're very original with their comps. But it'll be good to see him play at an affiliate, because he didn't participate in any of the full season or like the ACL last year. He played in instructs, and then he's gotten some action, throughout spring training in the minor league side. So it'll just be nice to see him play at an affiliate. It's going to be obviously an innings limit, but it'll just nice to see him, his stuff, how it's going to play against, older and advanced competition. And then the second round pick, this is the right-handed pitcher, Peyton Pallette, out of Arkansas. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery, so didn't pitch at all last year. He's been getting reps, again through camp. Another guy who's going to be in an innings limit, but the Sox had glaring issues with their pitching depth because it was just non-existent. They drafted a lot of pitchers last year, and a good amount of college pitchers to try and address that, to get some of these guys to the upper levels quick. So Peyton Pallette was a guy who was regarded as a possible, first round talent had he not been injured. So to kind of get two of those guys in one draft class for a system that was in dire need of pitching depth and high upside pitching depth, those are guys that I know all of us at Future Sox are very excited to see what they're able to do this year.
Gotta love it. Yeah, Peyton Pallette. That was the guy that was all over college baseball last year until he got hurt. People were hoping that he would be able to pitch, and there was talks. I think he was one of the preseason pitcher of the year watch list before he got hurt and had Tommy John before he was drafted. So yes, I'm super excited to watch him as well. I remember that name very clearly, so looking forward to that. All right, let's wrap this one up. Let's put a bow on it, and let's get your predictions, not mine, yours, because I'm not doing it with the AL Central this year. No way, no how. 81 and 81 last season. That was good enough for second place, 11 games behind the Guardians. The Guardians took a step up in the division and won with their young core. Obviously, you hope that Chicago can do the same thing what they have with this new management, this new coaching system coming in. Even though they are losing some veteran guys like Abreu, they bring in Benintendi. The pitching staff was not as good as last year, but you hope that can turn around. With that being said, last year they had 81 wins, so let's put the over-under at 81.5. Are they better than last year? So win total over-under on 81.5, and where do they finish in the AL Central in 2023?
Yeah, so this is hard for me to do. So because the optimist in me is okay, everything that could have went wrong last year did, and they somehow managed to be 500. I think the team, on the whole, has more talent than a 500 baseball team. They have a lot of question marks, which gives me pause as to okay, how good are they actually going to be? I know I did look it up. I don't do a lot of sports gambling or anything, but I did look up DraftKings as well has the White Sox at 83.5. I feel like that's kind of fair. I mean, I know whatever it was last year, I'm sure I said over and I looked like a clown, but that's what I get for being optimistic about the White Sox. I'm going to have to go back to that well, because I do think this team, they're a talented group and nothing went well. Everything sucked. Everyone was hurt. Everybody underperformed. And then when people were back, they just, it was just a toxic mess of just incompetent goo. It was just horrible. I think they're trying to fix the culture. They're trying to get these guys to play and try hard. The optimist in me says, yeah, they're going to clear 81.5 easy. As to do they win the division or anything? I mean, Cleveland is, to me, Cleveland is the class of division. They have been for a time. Cleveland does the thing where they're good. They kind of retool it a little bit. They get a bunch of guys. They just keep developing pitching. Here's a new dude who's just it's a new guy every year, and it's just so frustrating. It's here's another guy who the Sox won't be able to hit for the next 4 years. So, to me, Cleveland's the class of the division until the White Sox can either learn how to get Jose Ramirez out or not pitch to him at all. I think Cleveland is the favorite and will win the Central. I do think, though, that the Sox will clear the 81.5 win mark. I think with like the balanced schedule and maybe not being, you know, being able to just beat up on like all of the other, I guess, like lesser AL Central teams that will knock Cleveland down some, maybe help the White Sox out a little bit, maybe narrow it. But, the White Sox have to win a lot of people back. They have to prove that you know, that they're serious, that they're contenders. So like I think they'll be better than last year. I don't know
Okay.
that better than last year is enough to, unseat Cleveland at this time.
That's fair. That makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to agree or disagree because, like I said, not touching the AL Central this year. Can't do it.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much for
All right.
joining me on this show. As always, man, this was great getting you back on this show. We got to do it again, not just every year. We'll have to get you for another pulse check and see what these White Sox are doing in the middle of the season. But before I let you go, let everyone know where they can find you on socials, where you have your written work, and just anything else. The mic is yours, my friend.
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at sleepy_Harold_. Future Sox, we partnered with Sox Machine, which is a very notable, prominent White Sox, I guess, blog website. They do a lot of great work. Josh Nelson, Jim Margulis. So you can find all of our work there now. It's been migrated over. So you can just search Future Sox. It'll all come up. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. We just unveiled like our top 30. We're going to do our rundown of like positional breakdown, like top, corner infield, top middle infield. That thing will be coming out at the end of the month. And then
Awesome.
we'll be, right into the swing of the minor league season, which is like go time for all of us. So, if you need that minor league White Sox baseball fix, follow me, follow Future Sox at Future Sox on Twitter. And yeah, we'll have you covered.
Absolutely. Let's hope the White Sox draft a whole bunch of catchers in this draft too, because that's
They
definitely
need
needed,
it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to wrap it up for this episode here at the Row Report at the OK Baseball Podcast, presented by Slasher Sports. We will be back here with another episode as we continue with this team preview. We're just getting closer and closer to opening day now. We have a few teams left, and then we'll be back with our daily content covering all 30 teams. Even though we have 30 team previews and we're covering one team at a time, once the season starts, we're still covering all the teams just in every episode. We'll be back here with another episode soon. Everyone, take care.